when we talk of muscles, the first thing that comes to mind is non-veg food. There are so many things we don't know about food. We are looking at very small parts of the whole thing. Low-fat dairy, egg whites, these are safe. These have only proteins, nothing else. You can just consume as much as you want. That's not the truth.
So next we have Dr. Sharang Wartikar. He's going to be speaking on muscles and meat, mincing the myths.
The common belief is when we talk of muscles, the first thing that comes to mind is non-veg food. That concept is very predominant all over the world. And when we think of proteins, again the same thing. Most of the stuff that we think of has proteins is all non-veg, and that is where this whole concept has come. So today in my talk I'm going to address a few things. Do muscles run on proteins? How much protein do we really need? Can we get enough protein from plants? Is meat the better source for proteins? And can athletes thrive with a plant-based diet? So let's just quickly go through some basics. What are muscles? Now, there are soft tissues basically consisting of many fibers. We have more than 600 muscles in our body, different types of muscles. Now each muscle, if you look, is consisting of fascicles, myofascites, myofibrils, sarcomeres, and finally we have the myofilaments. These are the actin-myosin filaments. Now how do they work? If you see, the green one is the actin filament, the purple one is the myosin filament. And when they move, they cause the muscle to contract or relax, right? So when our brain sends an impulse to the motor end plate, there is a release of acetylcholine, and in presence of some energy what is used, what happens is the myosin then interacts with the actin and it pulls the entire fiber together. And when all the fibers contract at the same time, either the movement is achieved or a force is applied. So let's address the first question. Do muscles run on proteins? Well, what the energy package in all living things is ATP, adenosine triphosphate. That is what everything runs on. And it is formed in the body from carbohydrates, fats as well as proteins. Now, when we are at rest, the heart and the lungs are functioning normally. There is enough oxygen which is supplied to our muscles, and at that time what is known as an aerobic metabolism takes place, right, to provide the ATP. But when we start exercising, what happens? The heart and the lungs are not able to supply the amount of oxygen that is required to the muscles, and then they have to use what is known as anaerobic metabolism, where there is no oxygen involved. So initially when we want that instant energy, when you're just starting immediately, what the muscles rely on is a stored ATP. So ATP is stored in the muscles in some amount, but that lasts only a few seconds, up to 5 seconds at the most. Then it shifts to another molecule known as creatine phosphate. That is able to generate ATP at a faster rate, but again that goes off in 10 to 12 seconds, which is just about the time a 100-meter run can be completed by an athlete. Then we have the short-term energy. Now here what happens is, in absence of oxygen, the muscles start producing ATP from the muscle glycogen. Now this is some amount of sugar which is stored inside the muscles in the form of glycogen. But that again, after 30 seconds, the availability starts dropping. And what will happen then? By that time, the heart rate and the breathing and everything starts increasing, and so more oxygen starts getting supplied to the muscles. And that is where the aerobic oxygen metabolism sets in. And this, the primary source is carbohydrates. And this continues for a long period. So endurance athletes and marathons and everything are done with this. So these are the three graphically you can show: ATP and ATP creatine phosphate. They are the immediate ones. Then you have the anaerobic glycolysis, and then you have the oxidative system. Proteins contribute very little towards the energy. It is said that marathoners should eat pasta. There is a pasta party which is conducted one day before a run. So why do you think it could be? Is it because pasta doesn't slosh around while we are running? Is it because it soaks up more water and retains it for a longer period? Or is it because it breaks down easily and loads our cells with ATP? Right? So the real answer is that it helps in loading. So pasta has a lot of carbs, and the carbs converted into glucose are then stored by the muscle cells as ATP and glycogen, and then when the requirement is there, they activate the myosin heads and there is movement of muscle fibers. So this is how the things work. So carbohydrates make the muscles work, not proteins. We don't need to have proteins in order to run or anything. We need to have carbs. So that is very clear. So then what is the role of proteins? Now proteins are not just for skeletal muscle or muscle movements. They have a lot of other functions also in the body. So definitely they are a far more important component of all living organisms. There is no doubt about it. And these are all complex structures, but their basic unit is what is known as an amino acid. Now this contains nitrogen. The others have carbon dioxide, the carbon, hydrogen and oxygen atoms, but nitrogen is present in the proteins. And there are 9 essential amino acids. Out of 20, there are a total of 20 and 9 are essential. By essential, what we mean is that they are not synthesized in our body. So they must be obtained from our diet. There is something known as protein regeneration. What that means is every protein in our body is broken down, separated into amino acids, and those amino acids are reused. So there's a cycle which is going on. We don't need to rely on diet for every protein that our body has. These proteins are degraded and they are reused. But yet there is some amount of unavoidable loss of nitrogen. And that is, it is lost in feces, sweat, urine and through skin, hair and nails. So there is some amount of loss which occurs, and that is the only loss that the dietary amino acids are necessary to replenish. But if we don't do that, then yes, we will have severe forms of protein deficiency, very rarely seen nowadays. But what is more seen are the subtle effects like skin, hair and nail problems, loss of muscle mass, fatty liver, increased risk of bone fractures and tendency for infections. But there is also something known as excess proteins, right? So that is also an important. What we need to understand is that amino acids are not stored. They are excreted as urea. And keto acids which are left behind are used for energy, or they are stored as carbohydrates and fats. So in pregnancy, if you have excess proteins, then you will have risk of small for gestational age babies. If babies have excess proteins, then when they grow up to 5 to 7 years, they have a higher BMI and body fat percentage. And in adults, there is increased mortality plus risk of diabetes, cancer, heart disease, especially if animal protein is taken in. So how much protein do we really need? So WHO in 1985, they took some evidence from nitrogen-based studies and they proposed a mean requirement of 0.6 grams per kg per body weight. And this was based, now this is very important, on the intake of reference proteins. Now in the US, the reference proteins were egg, meat, milk or fish. So there is a big but here, right? And that but is that the data is from US surveys where as per the RDA itself, this was the average protein consumption in that population. Preschool children with 50 grams per day of proteins. Trust me, here you and I will find it difficult to attain this much protein per day. And this was their preschool children, and adults had 100 grams. And based on this, the entire extrapolation was done. 69% of the protein intake was from animal products. But why is this a problem? Because there is something called as adaptation as far as proteins are concerned. What is that adaptation? Whenever we have a lower protein intake, the turnover of the tissue protein is also lowered, the catabolic rate of amino acids is lower, and hence the dietary requirement of protein is also lowered. Similarly, it goes for higher protein intake. When the protein intake increases, the tissue turnover increases and dietary requirement also increases. So, body maintains a balance, right? The tissue protein pool goes into a new steady state depending upon your intake. And the balance influences the utilization of dietary protein. So how you utilize your body, it depends on how much protein you are taking in as well. So a person with higher intake will also have a higher requirement. So how reliable are these recommendations is the first question that we have to ask. Yet for the argument, let us consider that they are accurate even for our population. The recommendation is 0.8 grams per kg of body weight, which comes to around 60 grams for a person of 70 kgs and probably more in pregnancy, lactation and those who are athletes. So can we get enough proteins from plants? This is the next question. Now, this is very interesting. Justus von Liebig, he was one of the founders of organic chemistry, a great man at that time. In the 1800s, he hypothesized, okay, mark this word, he hypothesized, it was this hypothesis that muscular energy came from animal protein and that vegetarians were incapable of prolonged exercise. This was his hypothesis. Now what happened is the USDA at that time based their recommendation in their own words, based on his idea. That was their recommendation, based on his idea. Subsequently, all studies have proved that that is not right and that it comes from carbohydrates. But that whole concept got fixed in the mind of people that muscles means meat. And it has never been, the food industry has not allowed people to forget that. The ads and everything that you see, men eat meat, and all those campaigns which have been promoted has perpetuated that idea for long. The fact is that the proteins come from plants. Plants are the producers, they produce everything. Animals are only the middlemen. They eat plants and then we eat. While we can directly take the stuff from the plants themselves. Even meat eaters get half their proteins from plants. Okay, this is an interesting graph. Now you see, if all the agricultural land on our planet, 77% of the land is used by livestock. Livestock is animals which are raised for food. Right? Only 23% provides for food which is directly consumed by humans. But this 77% of land provides only 18% of the calories. While 82% of the calories, global calories that people eat comes only from this 23%. Even proteins which are supposed to be so high in animal food, only 37 come from meat and dairy. And if you look at the entire planet, 63% of the proteins are coming from plant-based food. And if you compare, actually if you see per calorie, broccoli has more proteins than steak, spinach has more than chicken and fish. 1 cup of cooked lentils equals 100 grams of beef, and a peanut butter sandwich has proteins equivalent to 3 eggs. Then what is the catch? What are we missing here? Like Dr. Sharbin has said, it is the package. Right? Plant sources have a lot of water and fiber, while animal sources have a lot of calories. That's all they have. So, while 100 calories of chicken you can eat in like 1 or 2 bites, if you want 100 calories from spinach, you are going to have 15 cups of spinach to eat. The other thing that is talked about is the quality of proteins. Like, animal based are superior because they are complete proteins. Now, a complete protein is something which has all the 9 essential amino acids. Lot of plant proteins are also complete proteins. In fact, all of them are complete proteins, just that the number of amino acids are different. Soybean protein is considered one of the best of the lot, and more closer to the, as far as the amino acids intake is concerned. But the fact is, we do not need complete proteins. What we need is, we need to eat a rainbow. That is what is required. That is the reason why our eyes are able to see so many colors. Carnivores don't have tricolor vision. They have monochromatic, dichromatic vision. Because each contains all the 9 amino acids in various amounts, and when you combine them together, they merge together and give us all that we require. So that is the importance. What about supplements? Many people take supplements, not needed. Again, look at the package. Like Sir said, very rightly said, there are so many things we don't know about food. We don't know. So we are looking at very small parts of the whole thing. And we think, okay, if we get this, then that is all that we need. No, there are so many things which we are not aware of. To look at the entire package. Protein supplements, best avoided, but in case you have to take, then try to take minimally processed, where there are no additives, at least in the package. Well, okay, fine, we can survive on plant protein, but is meat the better protein? I mean, can it give us something extra? Well, definitely, it's a highly protein dense food. There's no doubt about it. Animals have already done the work for you and contains all the 9 essential amino acids in large quantities and easy to achieve the protein target and even more. But the problem is, our body cannot store protein. So that extra protein is of no use to us, right? In fact, it will get stored as fat. So there is no added advantage in taking extra proteins. If you just see a comparison with the individual amino acids here, these are the recommended allowances that is needed. A cup of chickpeas would give you around 50% of all the amino acids. right? So you have 2 cups, you would have achieved your daily allowance. Even a pre-protein, if you take a supplement, you will get all the things in the necessary amount. If you look at chicken, it has 2 times the recommended daily allowances for almost all the amino acids. So are the middlemen doing a good job? Are these poor things, giving you so much proteins? Is that good? Not really. You know why? Because what they do is they remove most of the beneficial aspects of the plants, they concentrate the contaminants, they add inflammatory compounds, and they change our gut microbiome. That is the problem. That is what these middlemen are doing. Saturated fats and cholesterol are there in the animal foods, and that was a known thing, and there was a lot of hype about it. And that is why people came up with concepts like lean meat, low fat dairy, egg whites. These are safe. These have only proteins, nothing else. You can just consume as much as you want. But unfortunately, that's not the truth. Besides these, there are a lot of toxic and inflammatory products that are by default found in animal products. Heme iron, right? It's associated with an increased risk of colon cancer. Intake of 1 gram per day of heme iron gives an increase in 27% risk of cardiovascular diseases. Just by when you cook meat and fish, they release what are known as heterocyclic amines. These lead neurotoxicity, myocardial toxicity, diabetes and its complications, and even carcinogenicity. Similarly, when we preserve meat and fish, they release nitrosamines. These are carcinogenic as well as teratogenic. When we digest, when it reaches our gut, our intestines, it releases what is known as TMAO, and it has multiple problems in different systems with an increased risk of mortality. New-5-GC, this is a molecule which we have lost over the evolution process. When we ingest that, it comes from the animals. It creates a constant state of inflammation in the body, also leading to atherosclerosis and cancer. There are more freebies with animal proteins. They lead to a 40% higher risk of prostate cancer. You have a 3 times risk of colorectal cancer. A single meat-based meal has been shown to drop the endothelial vasodilatation by 27% and increase inflammation by 70%. An animal food starting in young adulthood, when you reach a higher age, there is a higher risk of CVD. So what I was saying, the package matters. So this was an interesting study, 18-year-old follow-up in 50 to 65-year-old with animal protein intake. They found a 75% increased risk in overall mortality, with almost a 400 times increase in cancer and diabetes mortality. And when whoever was taking a plant-based diet, all these risks were attenuated. The other big thing is absence of dietary fiber in animal foods. Now, dietary fibers are non-digestible carbs and lignin found only in plants. What happens? When low fiber, then the body weight is higher and there are more chronic diseases. If the RDA is 38 grams for adult men, in the US only 5% of the population meet these guidelines. Right? We are asking, where do you get your protein from? It's the wrong question. The question is, where do you get your fiber from? That is the question that we need to be asking. So if you just summarize the whole thing, yes, proteins are a lot more in meat and dairy, but you also get saturated fats, cholesterol, TMO, all these toxic things with a deranged gut bacteria. And these are the things that you do get in a plant-based diet, which you are not getting in a meat and dairy diet. And that is the problem that we are facing. So which is a better deal is something that we need to decide. Finally, I'll just take on this question, can athletes thrive? Like now we are talking about the general population. Now we are talking of athletes who are supposed to have more proteins. Now this is Patrick Baumeian. He is a world record holding strongman. He was asked, how could you get as strong as an ox without eating any meat? He said, have you ever seen an ox eating meat? So it is, this was an interesting study. The Roman gladiators who were supposed to be the strongest men in those times. We are talking of years ago. They did a bone analysis of the graves. They found 1800 years ago, they found the food was wheat, barley and beans with very little or no sign of meat or dairy products. In fact, these men were called barley men in those days. Probably that is the reason why. So since then, this is not something new. People have been following plant-based diet for years and years together. If you look at the athletes, Since 1908, Olympic, these are all winners, multiple gold medals, who are all following plant-based diets. Even today, these are athletes. I'm not saying these are vegan or exclusively following, but they have gone on record to say that plant-based diets have helped them achieve a much higher level of endurance, right? So they do consume on and off here and there, because like we discussed very clearly, let us not go for celebrities and these people, because an individual you should never worship. You should look at the logic behind it, right? Even when people fall sick, doctors will tell her, ye band karo, wo band karo. When you are back, you will resume everything. What is the logic? If something is good for you, let it remain continuously. Why do you want to resort to bad habits and then only come to good habits when you are in trouble? Let's keep the trouble away, right? So another question. Bodybuilders work out to increase the size of their muscles. After days, there's a pain and some soreness and all. So is it because of lactic acid buildup? Is it because there's not enough protein? Or are there because of microscopic tears in the muscle fibers? Yes, very correct. Right? So exercise leads to tiny tears here and there. 1 or 2 days later, there is what is known as delayed onset muscle soreness, which leads to inflammation and then healing. Now, if you continue this process again and again on a repeated manner, the muscles grow bigger. Again, coming to the same thing, regular exercise is what is going to build muscles, not just your food. So, beyond doubt, one can reach the pinnacle of any sport based on a plant-based diet. So, to summarize, do muscles run on proteins? No, they run on carbs. How much protein do we need? Just adequate amount of proteins. Can we get protein from plants? Definitely yes. Is meat the better protein source? Certainly not. And can athletes thrive on plant-based diet? Most certainly yes. This is my personal journey, 5 years on plant-based diet. This is what I have been able to achieve. And I do like to venture out into these sports, adventure sports. Right? Finally, we are what we eat. Right? So if that is the case, let us eat the rainbow and not the morgue. Let us choose wisely. Thank you so much.